Good morning. How are you all today? We're nearing the end of another month in the first month of the new year. So thank you all for being with us, for viewing these videos, and for those of you who send comments and encouraging words. I thank you so much. And please remember to like, subscribe, and share these videos with your family, friends, and those that you come in contact with. So thank you all for viewing with us. Welcome to Bible Study with Andre and Betty. Today we're in chapter 11 of the Gospel of John, and we'll be focusing on the subject that Jesus raises the dead. And of course, we're talking about Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, in this chapter. So again, thank you all and welcome. John chapter 11, verse 1. Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Verse 2. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. And we'll see this anointing by Mary in chapter 12. Therefore, verse 3, his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. Verse 4, when Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. And so Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and he's letting them know in this passage how he is the resurrection and the life. And verse 5, Jesus says, in verse 5, it says, Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. The Apostle John is the writer of this passage, and these are his words. And John always called himself the disciple whom Jesus loves. And now he says that he loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And verse 6, when he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was, which you'd have to go back to chapter 10, verses 40 and 41, where Jesus was at Beth Barah, near the Jordan River, where John was baptizing. So he stayed 2 days. And within these 2 days, Lazarus is gonna die. And then Jesus and the disciples will travel 2 days. And by the time they get there, Lazarus has been in the grave 4 days. Verse 7, Then after that saith he to his disciples, Let us go into Judea again. His disciples say unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? And so when he was in Judea before times, then the religious leaders sought to kill him and to crucify him or stone him. So the disciples naturally wonder why Jesus would risk going back to the place where they sought to stone him. But Jesus is going to explain in verse 9. Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world." And so here where the 24-hour day is explained, that there are 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness, and in different parts of the world, the daylight and the times are like central or standard time are different, but it ends up being 24 hours in a day. And so Jesus says, as long as we have the light of this world, then if we're walking, we will not stumble. But in verse 10, if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. Now, Jesus is the light of the world, but he's talking about natural light. We have no light in us except when we get born again. Verse 11, these things said he, and after that he saith unto them, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. And so here he's letting them know that they're on their way to see Lazarus. And he calls Lazarus his friend. Verse 12, then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Howbeit, verse 13, Jesus spake of his death, but they thought that he had spoken of taking of rest and sleep. And so here Jesus identifies that the believer, when life departs this body, are sleeping, and that the real them, the person that they are from the new birth experience, never die. But the body, when it dies, it's a type of a sleep, because we're going to be awakened again at the resurrection. And verse 14 says, then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there. That seems so strange for Jesus to respond that way to death. But it's because he is the life of the world, and for those who believe in him, death is only an entrance into his very presence, because absent from the body is present with the Lord. But verse 15 again, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye might believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. So they're traveling, and they're going to travel 2 days to get to the grave of Lazarus. Verse 16, then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. So good intentions on Thomas's part, but when Jesus resurrects again, then Thomas will not even believe him. And with him being called Didymus, it means of two minds. He believes, and yet he does not believe. Verse 17, then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days. Verse 18, now Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off. Verse 19, and many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. So, like we today, when we hear of a death in the family, those who are close to the family and relatives surround the family to comfort them. And so these people are these Jews that came to see about Martha and Mary. Verse 20, then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Now, Mary and Martha is identified in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42, as being sisters, and how Mary sat at the feet of Jesus, and Martha was cumbered with much busyness trying to prepare supper for the Lord. And she wanted Jesus to tell Mary to come and help her. But Jesus said to Martha that Mary had chosen that good part, and it will not be taken from her. So that's letting us know when Mary sat still in the house, is she had so been taught by Jesus that she did not move until she got direction from the Lord. And Christ's directed service is always profitable. But for Martha, she is a busy person and a anxious person. And as soon as she hears that Jesus is coming, she goes to the place near the Jordan River called Bethabara, and meet him there. And then in verse 21, then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. And in verse 32, we'll hear Mary say the same words. But you can say the same words and not mean the same thing. And we'll see this as we move forward. But Martha is speaking here. And then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. And she goes on to say, but I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Verse 23, Jesus saith unto her, thy brother shall rise again. And Martha, almost like she's not hearing what he said, Martha says to him in verse 24, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And this is the first resurrection, where there are three parts of the first resurrection. And we've talked about that. And so Martha is looking at the second coming, but Jesus is letting her know that right now her brother will come to life again. Verse 25, Jesus saith unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. These are the seventh and eighth I am statements that Jesus makes in the Gospel of John. So reading again, Jesus saith unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And so our eternal person never dies, whether we're believers or unbelievers. Our soul and our spirit never die. And the body goes to the grave, And that's where our soul and spirit lives while we live. But you can kill the body, but you cannot kill the soul. And so we're to fear him that can kill both body and soul, and cast it into hell, or it go into heaven. And so he says, he that believeth in me, though he were dead. Yes, he recognized that Lazarus was dead, but he's saying, yet shall he live. And this is going to be the glory for which Jesus waited 2 days before he traveled to Bethany, because he wanted, with the raising of Lazarus from the grave after 4 days, says firmly that he was not just sleeping and coming out of a coma or anything. He was actually dead. Verse 26. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? He's talking to Martha. And so we cannot wait until after we've died to believe in him. We've got to believe even while we yet live, and that prepares us to go to be with the Lord eternally. Verse 27. She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. She didn't address what the question that Jesus asked her, because her mind was on her brother. And so she said to him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. Verse 28. And when she had so said, she went her way and called Mary her sister secretly, saying, The Master is come and calleth for thee. Now this is going to show Christ's directed service, because as soon as Mary heard that, she arose quickly and came unto him. So while she sat still in the house while the conversation is occurring between Jesus and Martha, when she got the word that the Lord wanted her to come to him, she immediately got up and came to him. Verse 30. Now Jesus was not yet come into the town, but was in that place where Martha met him, which is at Bethbara, near the Jordan River. 31. The Jews then, which were with her in the house, comforted her when they saw Mary, that she rose up hastily and went out, followed her, saying, She goeth unto the grave to weep there. Now, nobody followed Martha to meet Jesus, but Mary, many of them followed her to where she was going. Verse 32. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet. Note the difference from Martha. In verse 21, Martha just came to Jesus and started talking to him. But Mary, when she saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. And so now she can respond, because she knew Jesus was the resurrection and the life. But she can say, had you been here, my brother would not have died. Verse 33. And when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And so Jesus felt the pain that Mary and Martha were feeling, because he knows our infirmities and what we go through. He takes it personally and go through that same thing with us. So verse 34 says, and said, Jesus said, where have you laid him? They say unto him, Lord, come and see. Verse 35, the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. And that's because he was feeling the compassion and the love that these sisters had for their brother, and he loved him too. Verse 36, then said the Jews, behold how he loved him. Verse 37, and some of them said, could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused that even this man should not have died? And Jesus, therefore, groaning again in himself or in his spirit, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. And so Jesus is understanding all that they are talking about and participating in with the sisters of Lazarus. Verse 39, Jesus says, take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he has been dead 4 days. So Jesus asks of us to do what we're able to do in getting our prayers and our life in order. They couldn't raise the dead, but they could remove the stone. Verse 40. Jesus saith unto her, said I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? Verse 41. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee. This is a prayer of thanksgiving. Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. Verse 42, and I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the people which stand by, I said it. Why? That they may believe that thou hast sent me. So the purpose of all of this is for the people to believe Jesus is who he says he is. Verse 43. And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And so there were other grave sites in that same place, but to be sure that the people understood, he called Lazarus to come forth. Verse 44. And he that was dead came forth. He opened his eyes, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face were bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, loose him and let him go. And so he, being raised from the dead, he has to shake off the grave clothes, and then he will be able to then he will be free to come out of the grave. Verse 45. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary, please note that many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did, believed on him. Verse 46, but some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus has done. Now we're looking at the same situation and two different responses. The people are going to glorify and believe the Lord, the religious leaders are going to be mad and upset about what had happened. Then many of the Jews which came, let's see, I'm reading that again. I'm reading verse 47 now. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, What do we? For this man doeth many miracles. So they are hypocrites, and they do not have ears to hear. Verse 48. This is what the religious leaders are saying. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. So their word about their positions in society. Verse 49. And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, Ye know nothing at all. Verse 50. Nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. So without Caiaphas realizing it, he's prophesying about the things that Jesus came to do, that is, pay the sin debt for not only the Jews, but also the whole world. Verse 51, and this spake he not of himself, this didn't come from him, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus should die for that nation. Verse 52, and not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered abroad. So that's everyone. Verse 53. Then from that day forth, they took counsel together for to put him to death. Instead of them choosing to follow him, they chose to put him to death. Verse 54. Jesus therefore walked no more openly among the Jews, but went thence unto a country near to the wilderness, into a city called Ephraim, and there continued with his disciples. The city called Ephraim, simply saying it is inheritance of the tribe of Ephraim, which was Joseph's younger son. Verse 55. And the Jews' Passover was nigh at hand, and many went out of the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. And so this is the third Passover that is recorded in the book Gospel of John, and Jesus will become the Passover lamb for the Jews and for the Gentiles at this particular Passover. And it's letting us see that there were 3.5 years to his earthly ministry. Verse 56. Then sought they for Jesus, and spake among themselves as they stood in the temple, What think ye, that he will not come to the feast? Verse 57. Now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given a commandment, that if any man knew where he were, he should show it. And the reason they gave that commandment is that they might take him, or that they might arrest him and bring him before the Roman governor. So that's chapter 11 of John chapter. This is the message of the 11th chapter of John that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, and no man can come unto the Father but by him. And so he's demonstrating through Lazarus' resurrection that he that liveth and believeth on him shall never die. And that is the real us. Our bodies go to the grave, but our eternal life goes to be with the Lord. So thank you all for listening. We'll pick up next time in chapter 12. You all have a great day and a great week. Bye.